Welcome back, toy fans and toy makers and anyone who generally likes toys, which is pretty much everyone in the world. Today, I am talking about the Big Jim toy line from Mattel, and specifically how Big Jim, in retrospective, was kind of the planning stages, testing ground for Masters of the Universe. As a little background to kind of build up my case, let me give you a quick background on who Big Jim is, and then we're going to talk about the direct influence on the Masters of the Universe He-Man brand. So Big Jim was a 70s toy line from Mattel, and in a lot of ways it was kind of Mattel's answer to both G.I. Joe and a male version of Barbie. Big Jim was a character that could beat anything and anyone, from a sports star to a secret agent to a pirate. And just like Barbie, he had friends and sort of co-dolls from different ethnicities to build out the line. And yeah, I mean, it was very much a male version of the Barbie play pattern, where you could dress the doll up, which was very on trend. G.I. Joe was launched in the mid-60s and was huge. It was really a game changer in the toy industry. And Big Jim basically came along, and at 12 inches, it was completely compatible with G.I. Joe. Now, one of the key things is that Big Jim was distributed in Mexico by a company called Kid Acero. Now, Kid Acero means Kid Steel. And this is important, well, because of this guy, Max Steel. And I promise I'm getting to He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, but we need some background here. So Max Steel, whether you know him as the previous image or sort of the reinvented version they did for the live-action feature about 5-10 years ago, the key thing about Max Steel is he is literally the descendant of Big Jim. Big Jim is, in continuity, Max Steel's father, or sometimes uncle, depending on the continuity. But the reason that Max Steel is so popular is because of the heritage of playing with Big Jim, and because it was distributed by a company called Kid Steel, essentially. Now, you might be saying, wait a minute, Big Jim's not that popular. Nah, he is. He outsells Batman and Spider-Man in Mexico and South America. He is huge in the Latin American market. And that is because the Big Jim line never stopped shipping in the Latin America market, and it had such a huge heritage that really Big Jim just became Max Steel and kept going in Latin America. It didn't do that so much in America, but that is why Max Steel is so huge there today, because the heritage of playing with Big Jim never ended south of the border. But it did tend to tail off in America. And so in the late 70s, early 80s, Mattel designers were tasked with coming up with a new version of Big Jim, a new way to bring male action to kids now that Big Jim wasn't as popular in America, despite the popularity in South America. And that's where this guy, Roger Sweet, comes along. He literally took Big Jim toys and sculpted over them to create what are known as the original He-Man prototypes. So here you have sort of the first link between MOTU and Big Jim. And of course, we made those prototypes eventually into Comic-Con exclusives in the Classics line, but that's a YouTube video for another time. There's some other low-hanging fruit about the Big Jim line and Masters of the Universe, and that mostly is the repainted animals that got used in the line. I'll just cover this briefly because I talked about this a lot in the Battle Cat video, but essentially the tiger and the eagle from the Big Jim line, although the tiger was actually originally from a Tarzan line, even predating Big Jim, got reused for Masters of the Universe as Zor and Battle Cat and Panther. This is just the low-hanging fruit, though. The links between Big Jim and Masters of the Universe go a lot deeper than just the reuse and the redeco of some of the animals created for Big Jim. So essentially, now that Big Jim is on the wane, a new toy line is needed for boys in America, since the 12-inch line is just not hitting it anymore the way it did in South America. Now, the other piece of the puzzle, and I can attest to this from my time at Mattel. The Mattel designers tend to wash, rinse, and repeat ideas a lot. And a lot of this is simply because marketing tends to switch every 2 to 3 years, but design doesn't. Design sticks around. So ideas that might have got nixed by marketing in one year, design tends to resubmit them the following year or another, or 2 years later, just in a different toy line. Sometimes you see the same features represented over and over again by design. This isn't necessarily a bad thing because sometimes an idea is great, marketing just doesn't get it. So they kind of have to wait for a new marketing team to come along that does get their idea. And this, I guess you could say, resubmission pattern definitely wasn't limited to the time I spent at Mattel. You can clearly see that happening in the late 70s. So let's jump in and take a look. So this is one of the Big Jim bad guys that was released as part of when Big Jim was kind of more of a superhero. And he had an interesting feature that his face would change by spinning around to go from a human face to a monster face. It was an action feature developed for Big Jim. Very successful, and they actually used it on the humans too, giving them sort of angry faces versus smiling faces. And it became one of the cooler features that made Big Jim different from toys like G.I. Joe that didn't have any kind of action features, that were just characters to sort of dress up. And oh gee, look, a couple years later, we see that same concept showing up in the Masters of the Universe line. Big Jim was really a testing ground. It was basically where so many of the action features that wound up becoming part of Masters of the Universe had their starts. And if it wasn't for Big Jim, we would probably have never had the Masters of the Universe line. I know I showed you a few samples, like repainted tigers, but yeah, there's some more that are really like, wow, that isn't just sort of testing ground, that sort of is a He-Man figure. So this is Captain Drake, one of the pirates from the Big Jim line. They started making other characters towards the end. It wasn't just Jim. He started having kind of a whole catalog of good guys and bad guys. And, well, Captain Drake here also had that same spinning feature, except not only did he have the human change, but his spinning feature was a skull face in a purple hood. Not only, was this his changed feature, but it was shown prominently on the packaging and became the selling feature for why you should get Captain Jake, the evil pirate. A pirate character with a skull face and a purple hood. You can already see how these concepts in the Big Jim line are in the mind of the designers. They're all over the office. They're on their walls. They've got samples everywhere. And when it came time to designing Masters of the Universe, well, like I said, wash, rinse, repeat. If it worked once, why not again? And it doesn't just stop and start with Skeletor. There are tons of examples in the Big Jim line. Like, for example, Torpedo Fist, who had a giant metal fist that would be used for bashing the enemies. And then we would see this repeated in the Masters of the Universe line with Fisto. Again, a very successful, proven play pattern and action feature, simply recycled because it was a good idea. Oh, and of course, there's, you probably recognize who this guy became in the Masters of the Universe line. In fact, he was called Iron Jaw in Big Jim, and he came with multiple arm attachments and a articulated, spiked jaw. I mean, even the facial features of this guy. He had a hook hand, a blaster hand. They could all fit into his suitcase. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely no playing around the fact that this was clearly the influence for Trapjaw. You can see it in the eyes, you could see it in the jaw, you could see it in the hook arm. So, as Big Jim continued to pump out these characters that tended to not get released in the US as much because they were going to South America, more and more ideas that the designers had put into the Big Jim line were getting recycled and put into the Masters of the Universe line so that they could get a proper release in the States and in Europe. Here you can see another example with Icarius or Flipshot here, pretty much wearing the exact same armor as the Space Armor Big Jim figure. The examples just go on and on and on. As the designers are seeing their really innovative work only getting to half of the world because Big Jim was just shipping and doing gangbusters in South America and Mexico, I completely understand them feeling like, well, wait a minute, I put all this work into this, and I really want to get these toys into a broader audience in the US and Europe. So you saw idea after idea after idea from the Big Jim line, especially the tail end of the Big Jim line, showing up again and again and again in the Masters of the Universe line. Whether it was color schemes or action features or just the way the characters were designed, Big Jim was really kind of like a Site B. It was sort of the testing ground for Masters of the Universe, and because so many of the Big Jim figures were only going to the Latin market, the designers were essentially taking these great ideas and finding ways to get them to the US market, if you will, I guess you could say disguised as Masters of the Universe figures. Hey, if the idea worked in one line, and if it was only shipping to one place in the world and not to the US and Europe, why not repeat it? Big Jim and Jack Kirby, you can see the video I did on Jack Kirby, two lines that were developed in the late 70s that basically gave birth to Masters of the Universe. While absolutely credit goes to Roger Sweet and Mark Taylor and the others who worked on the Masters of the Universe brand, you can see how the toy lines that were being developed at the same time were huge influencers on what became Masters of the Universe. Honest feedback is welcome, guys. I'd love to know what you think of these videos, even the thumbnails. What do you think? Do you like how I'm doing everything? Subscribe, give me a like, let me know in your comments below what else you'd like to see, and I hope to answer all your questions about toys that I can. See you around the internet.